Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. Before I start, I always remember and pay homage to all my teachers. And again, we're continuing on with the discussion of Mumuksupadi, which is a book. Mumukshu is a person who desires liberation, and Mumuksupadi is a book for those persons who desire liberation. It's written by the Tengalaya Acharya of the Southern School of Sri Vaishnavism, Pillai Lokacharya, and it has a commentary on it by Manavala Mahamunigal. And so we are in the Charma Sloka Prakaranam, which is the third section of the book. The book deals with the three mantras, the Astaksha, Tiru Astakshara mantra, the 8-syllable mantra, Om Namo Narayana, the Dvaya mantra, which comes in two parts in the middle section, Sriman Narayana Charano Sharanam Papadye, Srimate Narayana Namaha. And now we've come to the last section of the book, which deals with the Charma Sloka of Lord Krishna, the final order of Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the 66th verse of the 18th chapter. Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam bhaja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami masajaha. So up until now, we have discussed in this section, in the Charma Sloka section, we have discussed the first word, which is sarva dharman, and it's a compound word. We also discussed in general what the mantra means, and now we're going to go word by word. And so we're getting to the second word, and the second word is parityaja. So let's have a look at the main text. So again, we're looking at this is Mumuksupadi. Last time we finished with Sutra 198, which basically says these are called dharmas because of the confused nature of Arjuna. So Lord Krishna calls these things dharmas because of the confused nature of Arjuna in the conversation. The question, usually in the commentary, Manavala Mahamuniga asks a question in order to go to the next part. So thus he reveals the meaning of the first word. After this, he presents the second word. So the second word, of course, is sarva dharman. Parityaja is the second word. So text 199, parityaja. Since this word also has three parts, we discussed how sarva dharman has three parts. It has sarva, dharma, and an, which is the ending to dharman. Okay, so we discussed that already. So parityaja also has three parts to it. The root, tyaga, right? So when we say tyaja, it's a form of tyaga. Tyaga means to renounce, to give up. The gerund form, a gerund is a verbal noun. Okay, so here the technical name for that is liyap in Sanskrit, and the prefix pari, right? So in Sanskrit there are these 20 or so prefixes called upasargas, right? And one of them is pari. So the prefix pari. So we have the root of the verb to abandon or to give up, tyaga. We have an upasarga or a prefix which changes the meaning of the root. Just for instance, I'll give you an example. The word gachati means he goes in Sanskrit. If I say agachati, is the prefix. If I put agachati before it, if I put the little a before it, then it means come instead of go. So it modifies the upasargas or the prefixes to the verb roots, modify the meaning of the verb. Okay, so we have this verb here, tyaga, to renounce or to give up or to abandon, right? How does the word pari change that meaning? And then also, how is it the fact that the verb, the verbal root, has a particular gerund form, right? Of the verb root, right? So he first gives the meaning of tyaja. So we have this tyaga, the gerund form, and the prefix pari are the three parts of parityaja. Okay, so continuing on to Sutra 200. The verb tyaga means to consider these aforementioned upayas. Remember, the word upaya means to liberation. So an upaya is a means to liberation. What are some of the upayas that we read about in Bhagavad Gita? Karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, and of course, sharanagati or prapatti, which can also be considered a yoga by some people, right? So that is the path of works, the path of knowledge, the path of devotion, and the path of surrender. So these are different paths or means which Krishna preaches in the Bhagavad Gita to lead to moksha. Okay, so the verb tyaga means to consider all of these aforementioned upayas, right? What was discussed last time as sarva dharman, all the different paths of effort, right? Meaning karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. Prapatti is not a path of effort, right? Of self-effort. I mean, it's God's effort, not your effort, right? And relinquish them with the particular attitude that says, quote, like those who have conceived mother of pearl to be silver, or like those who have set their mind on the wrong direction, we have attributed the notion of upaya, the means, to things which are not upayas. And this is specifically an idea or a doctrine of the southern school, the Tengalai Acharyas, the Sri Rangamacharyas, and not necessarily accepted by the northern school, the followers of Vedanta Deshika, the Wadaglas. Okay, so that they do not accept Karma Yoga. The Sri Rangamacharyas, or Tengalai Sri Vaishnavas, do not actually accept Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga as means, as proper means. And we've discussed this before. That is because inherent in those means of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga are self-effort. And that self-effort means that the soul has to have some sort of ego, has to have some sort of wrong idea that it can initiate some actions or some efforts to help itself, to help save itself, or to help bring it to moksha. Right, and this is wrong, according to the Southern school. So, in this context, tyaga does not mean just to relinquish, or to abandon, or to give up. It means to consider the nature of these things, which have previously been called upayas, but previously been called means to moksha, to liberation, and relinquish them with the following attitude, the following particular attitude. Like those who have conceived mother of pearl, which is not silver, to be silver. And like those who, wanting to go one way, to do some personal business, take the wrong direction as the correct one. We who desire a means for attaining the Lord have attributed the notion of upaya to things which are not upayas. Okay, so there's a couple of classical examples given here. The first classical example is a person who sees mother of pearl and thinks that it is silver. So even Adi Shankaracharya uses this analogy. So just imagine you're walking on a beach and you look down and you see a shell. And the inside of the shell has this silver-like lining, which is called mother of pearl. So you're familiar with silver. You've seen silver in the market. You've seen items made of silver. You know silver is a precious metal. So you look and at first glance, you think somebody has dropped a piece of silver on the beach. But then you come to realize the fact is it's not silver. It's simply the shell, and it's simply the mother of pearl. The mother of pearl is not silver. It looks silver in color, and it can be mistaken for the metal silver, which is a precious item, much more precious than the mother of pearl. So this is a mistake. This is an illusion. With Shankara gives this as a typical illusion. Some of the other ideas he has about illusion is that when you see in a slightly darkened room, you might see the shape of a snake. But in fact, it's actually, if you turn the light on, it's a rope, like that. So the point being made here is that throughout the whole Bhagavad Gita, all the 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna is teaching these other ways, teaching Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. The point being made here by Pilalokacharya and Manavala Mahamuni and the southern Sri Rangamacharyas of the Tengalite section, right, is that these are not real means. These are not proper means to liberation. They're not proper because they are predicated on the idea that the soul has to do something or actually can do something to save himself. There is nothing that the soul can do to save himself. There is nothing that the soul can do to attain liberation by itself, right? So we see the differences between bhakti and prapatti. Bhakti yoga, most of the Vaishnava Sampradayas, in fact, all the Vaishnava Sampradayas are pretty much preaching bhakti yoga. They're preaching that you perform some efforts, and however meager those efforts are, the Lord will give you mercy because you perform those efforts. So there is faith in God, but his grace is only obtained by faith plus some works. There has to be some works, there has to be some activity by some effort by the individual in order to gain the grace of the Lord and to attain liberation. Whereas the Southern Acharyas say, no, there's nothing that you can do to get that grace of the Lord. That grace of the Lord is causeless and is irresistible, right? So it is something that the Lord bestows upon us like that. There is nothing that we can do. The classical examples are the cat and the monkey. So the mother monkey, right, carries the baby, but the way that she carries the baby is the baby it must be on her back and hanging on to the fur on the back of the monkey. So if the baby doesn't cling tightly to the mother, the baby will fall off when the mother moves from tree to tree. Whereas the baby kitten is completely helpless, lying there, and the mother cat comes and picks it up in its mouth and takes it to safety. The baby kitten doesn't do anything. The mother cat does everything like that. In fact, the baby kitten may even struggle against the mother, right? And still the mother overcomes that and takes the baby and takes it to safety, takes the baby kitten to safety like that. So this is the system of property. And the idea is more like bhakti yoga, is more like the cat example. So we have that example also in Christianity. We have between the Catholics and the Protestants. The Roman Catholics, they tend to talk about faith plus works as being the means to worship God or to attain perfection or to attain God, right? And whereas the Protestants say by faith alone and not by any works. And there are quotations in the Bible either way, and theologians will debate it like that. But basically, we've come up with these two sects because of that. Because this is one of the reasons why we have the split in Christianity and also the split in Sri Vaishnavism as well. So let's go and look and see what P.B. Anangacharya has to say in his commentary on this particular sutra. Okay, so here we have the two sutras that we just discussed from the main text. Right, they are sutras or churnikas, which are the Tamil name for sutra is churnika, 203 and 204. The numbering is a little different in this edition. And this is the Sarata Dipika commentary by P.B. Anangacharya of Kanchipuram on Mumuksupadi. So, of course, just one word in the Sutra 203, which is Sutra 199, I believe, in the other one. In the other text, and it's just prityaja. So that is that is the term that we're talking about. We're talking about that word, prityaja. And he says here that the term prityaja is now explained. Tyaja is renouncing. Here it does not mean the simple act of giving up. It means described above must be looked at, what the means described above in the word sarva dharman, right? That we discussed last time, have to be looked at carefully. Then repenting that we who seek the right path to the Lord set ourselves in the wrong paths, similar to those who looked at a silvery shell and mistook it for silver, or to those who wished to go one way and went in the opposite direction. We should give them up. We should give them up. So the thing that he adds here is he adds that we should give them up. We should give up Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga as means to liberation. It's not that we should give up work. It's not that we should give up study. It's not that we should give up devotion. No, we can do all these things. We can do work, we can do study, and we can do devotion, and we can do them on behalf of the Lord. We can offer all the results of our work, our study, and our devotion to the Lord. But we don't do all those things as a means to liberation. That's the main thing. That's the point being explained here. So let's go back to the main texts and continue on with the next sutra. So also this thing, everybody knows the other example, apart from the shell and the silver, is that going in one direction and then finding out that you're going the wrong way and turning around, right? So if you've adopted a path, and this is for anybody out there, if you've adopted a particular path, a particular religion, a particular philosophy, and you come to the realization, when you come to the realization that there might be something better or what you're doing is not actually correct, then the proper thing to do is not continue on the same path, but to change your direction, which is natural. It happens all the time in India. You ask a person, you're looking for the post office, you ask, where's the post office? Someone gives you a wrong direction and you go in the wrong direction. And then after a while, you ask somebody again and they say, no, you're going in the complete wrong direction, go that way, like that. So you have to verify at every step. And when you come to a point where you realize that your efforts are going to be fruitless going in that direction, turn around and go the other way. Okay, so that's the point being made here. So let's continue on with text 200. Okay, so basically this was the general meaning of tyaga, the word to abandon or to give up, right? The verb was explained in this sutra. And now we're going to go to the next sutra, which explains the prefix. The prefix is pari. It's called an upasarga in Sanskrit. So, 201. The prefix, upasarga, pari, states that just as in giving up serious sins, pataka, the word pataka in Sanskrit means a sin. Now, in Sanskrit, in the Sanskrit scriptures, there are different types of sins. There are also different types of pious activities, right? Some are better. Some of the pious activities give you more piety. Some give you less piety. Yeah. So, and some of the sins are more serious than others. There are 5 major sins, which are called Mahapatikas. The word Maha usually means great. And then there are minor Upapatikas. Upapatika means a small sin. But in any case, just as in giving up serious sins, one has to give these up along with the desires and tendencies to do them again, and with shame, right, which means regret that you performed that sin, so that they don't occur again. So it's not just a matter of giving up the sin. It's not just a matter of realizing that you performed, that you did a sin, but also giving up the desire to do it again, giving up the tendency to do it again, having some humility and some shame and regret for doing it, so that it won't happen again. All of these steps are important. So what does the word pari mean? The prefix pari then, when taken to mean completely, so this means completely. Okay, so if we're completely giving up something, we're not just giving up the action, we're giving up the desire, we're giving up the tendency to do it again, we're giving up, we're in humility, we're admitting our mistake, right? We have shame, we have some regret, like that. And if we do it in that way, it's considered to be a complete renunciation, a complete giving up of the thing. So that's why the word pari is given here, to show us that abandonment should be complete and shouldn't be incomplete. So the prefix pari, when taken to mean completely, as is in the definition, pari means completely, would be unnecessary, since this idea is stated in the word sarva, right? In the compound sarva dharman, which means all religion, or all religions, or all paths of to liberation, or paths of self-effort, right? Paths to liberation, paths of self-effort. Then what about that word sarva? Wouldn't it be redundant? There's such a thing as in Sanskrit as redundancy by stating something twice, right? So this is considered a fault in a Sanskrit sentence. If I compose a sentence and I use two words which mean the same thing in the sentence, two adjectives for a noun to describe a noun, which mean exactly the same thing, therefore that will be considered a fault of double, using the same word twice, right? So here it's not that. It's not that, because the word sarva is referring to the dharmas, referring to the paths themselves, whereas here it's stated that the pari means completely, in the same sense. It's sort of means the same as sarva. It means all the aspects of abandonment. We're not talking about all the dharmas here. We're talking about all the aspects of abandonment, meaning giving up the actual act, giving up the desire, giving up the tendency to do it again, right? Having shame and humility and regret. And that is all the different aspects of the complete abandonment, which is talked about in Parityaja. Okay, so since this idea is stated in the word sarva, so there's an argument being made here. The prefix pari, right, when taken to mean completely, as in the definition pari means completely, would be unnecessary, since this idea is stated in the word sarva. Therefore, it would be redundant. So we have to interpret it otherwise. Right? When one gives up all those grave offenses, such as killing a Brahmin, drinking liquor, stealing, cohabitating with one's teacher's wife, right? This is a list of what I said is the Mahapatikas, the big sins. So these are the big sins. And the liquor described here, by the way, is very hard. It's hard liquor. There are different sins in the Smriti Shastras, and they make a distinction between distilled liquor and just slightly alcoholic beverages, whatever it is. So there's a distinction made there in Smriti Shastras, although, of course, obviously, there are different rules for the different castes and divisions in society in India regarding liquor. Okay, so when one gives up all of the grave offenses, such as killing a Brahmin, drinking liquor, stealing, cohabitating with one's teacher's wife, right? One relinquishes them along with the desires and tendencies which make one want to engage in them again, by becoming ashamed at the thought that one committed them, right? When we become ashamed, we have regret that we did it. When it is the same when relinquishing the other upayas, which the Lord of Dharma called sins in the following passage. So the Lord of Dharma usually means Yamaraja. The word Yama means rules. So the king of rules, right, or Yamaraja, the person that judges people after death, right, has said in the following passage, since you are mortally afraid of sins, O Bharata, don't do those things you have given up and be devoted to Narayana, right? So we have a couple of footnotes here. Footnote number 19 tells us, is from Manusmriti or Manusamhita, right, which is a Dharma Shastra, which has these rules for the Varnashram system in India of society. And it's from chapter 11, verse 54. And that is the definition of the 5 Mahapatikas, or the great sins. We can look up Manu and we can have a look and see what they are, like that. So we have stealing wealth or gold, usually. You could be stealing other things too, but stealing the possessions, killing a Brahmin, drinking spirituous liquor, distilled liquor, right? Cohabitating with the teacher's, the guru's wife, because the guru is normally a grihastha, it's normally a householder. And there's one other, which slips my mind right at the moment, but we can look it up and we can find it out. Okay, so then we have down here this quotation, this passage, since you're mortally afraid of sins, O Bharata, don't do those things you have given up and be devoted to Narayana. So that is got a footnote also. So let's have a look at the footnote. The footnote here says, this is attributed to a shastra called Vishnu Dharma, chapter 66, verse 71. Now, Vedanta Deshika, who is the proto-Vadagalai, or the leader of the acharyas of the northern school, of the Kanchipuram school, right, objects to interpreting the context of this passage to imply that it is the upayas for moksha, such as karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, which the Lord is here calling sins. He says, there is no authority stating that when the Lord says, since you are mortally afraid of sins, he is deprecating upasana or bhakti yoga and the like by referring to them as sins. Therefore, because they are both enjoined, all these things are enjoined for you, for one who seeks moksha, bhakti and prapati are each to be undertaken according to one's qualification. And this is a quotation from Rahasya Trayasaram, which is the magnum opus of Vedanta Deshika. Amongst his Rahasya Granthas, his books on esoteric secrets about the mantras, chapter 24, page 709. You can also look at that if we want. But Vedanta Deshika, therefore, in his Rahasya Trayasara, Rahasya means secrets, means it refers to the secret mantras which are given in initiation. Traya means three. We were also discussing the three mantras. Sara means the essence of the three mantras. So in his Rahasya Trayasara, what Deshika is saying here is that the Lord has said that these things are upayas, are means. So where, who are you to say that they're not means? Of course, we've gone through this before, this argumentation between the northern and southern schools on this particular point. It's a very small point, but basically we have to remember that neither the Vadagalais nor the Tengalais, the northern school or the southern school, recommend doing bhakti yoga as a means to moksha. Neither of them recommend doing bhakti yoga, even if you're qualified for bhakti yoga. Now, the definition in Sri Vaishnavism of somebody who's qualified to perform bhakti yoga perfectly is that the person has to be a male dvija born in a Brahman Kshatriya Vaishya family, and therefore be qualified to perform all the activities given in the scriptures that are there in Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Otherwise, if the person isn't that, if somebody's born female or born in a lower class, they're either foreigners or they're mlechas or they're sudras or they're classified as outcasts or very low class in the Indian Varnashram social system. Therefore, for those people, it's only property is the only way. And it's interesting that the Sri Vaishnavacharyas, even though many of them are great Brahmins and very learned scholars, even Ramanuja only took to the process of property and never recommended to perform bhakti yoga. They always recommended to perform property. And that's what they were preaching, property. So it's really an academic argument being made by Vedanta Deshika. He's saying, no, these are actual paths to liberation, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. But the qualification for them is very high. And even Vedanta Deshika says, I'm not performing Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, or Jnana Yoga, right? Even though I'm qualified for it because he was a male Brahmin living in that time, right? But if somebody wants to do them, he has to be qualified like that, and he has to perform them fully and properly like that. Whereas the Tengalai Acharyas are saying, even if you're qualified for those things, just give them up because those paths are not the way. They're actually not the way. The real way is property or surrender, because it's only by the grace of the Lord that one can achieve liberation. And it's not by any effort that you can make. So even if you make a great effort by Karma Yoga or Jnana Yoga, or even a great effort of Bhakti Yoga, it doesn't add up to moksha. right? Still, you need the grace of the Lord. So if you need the grace of the Lord, then just get the grace of the Lord and don't bother about these other things, because these other things are not the actual thing that are saving you. It's only the grace of the Lord. So it's a very small point, but we have to note that Sri Vaishnavism doesn't teach people to do bhakti yoga. It doesn't teach people to do karma yoga, jnana yoga, or bhakti yoga. It teaches people to do property or surrender to God, to realize their true nature as the property, the slave, the servant of God, and by doing so, completely submit to His will. Completely submit to His will, His Satya Sankalpa, His eternal will, and let Him take care of that. Let Him take care of everything. So this is, again, we got this discussion of the particular point. Vedanta Deshika is trying to say that if we say that karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga are actually not means to liberation, or to say that they're like sins, actually, because they involve a little bit of false ego, right? Even if it's a slight amount, right? To say something like that goes against the spirit of the Gita and the spirit of Scripture in general, and therefore we shouldn't go against the spirit of Scripture in general, even though in particular we won't follow that. We won't follow those means. So, pretty much an academic argument, because Sri Vaishnavas are not following those paths. So we have to relinquish them, along with, one, the desire, which might make us deliberately do them again. Two, the tendencies, which might make us get involved with them unintentionally, in order to make sure that we won't engage in them again. We must become ashamed, right? So we could put a 3 next to that, maybe, and that means there should be shame and there should be regret. In performing some sin, or even in this case, the Tengalais are saying that karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, these processes, we can see them as simple as well. So we can regret performing these as a means to moksha. We don't regret. We've done devotional activities, we've done work, and we've offered the results to God. We've studied, and we've done karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga acts. We don't regret them. What we regret is the mentality that we think that they are actually the thing which can save us. That's what we regret, right? So, saying that, I did these things which are diametrically opposed to the essential nature of having the Lord Himself as my only way, right? So the point is that thinking that I can in some way attain liberation by my own efforts is against my essential nature of being a thing which is completely controlled and owned and supported by the Lord. So, after this, he reveals the meaning of the gerund form, verbal noun. Right. So, text 202. The gerund form, again, the technical word for it is liap, states that we have to first completely relinquish other means and then surrender. As in the statement, having bathed, one should take food. So we heard this also in the classes by Dr. Alwar on Mumuksupadi. He also mentioned this before, that there's a statement in the scriptures, having bathed, one takes food. This is because there are two meanings sometimes given to this form of word in Sanskrit grammar. One meaning is the meaning vidhi, and one is the meaning atavad or anuvad. So one is a statement of fact. Anuvad is a statement of fact. Vidhi is an actual rule. So here's a rule. An example of a rule to understand what a rule is in Sanskrit. So having bathed, one should take food. What it means is you should take food, but you should first of all, the prerequisite for taking food is you should take a bath first before you take food. So somebody comes to your house, you say, would you like to stay for dinner? please go freshen up, go wash up. Bathe first, then come and take meals, have food, like that. The gerund form in Prityaja is not like the statement, having eaten something forbidden, perform the month-long fast, Chandrayana, as expiation. So this is a quotation from the Ushana Samhita, chapter 5, verse 50. So there's a statement in there. Having eaten something forbidden, right? So if we eat something forbidden, then we've committed a sin. In order to do prayaschita or atone for that particular sin, there's a month-long fast, and I described this Chandrayana fasting before, that what you do is you start either at the full moon or the new moon. I think start at the full moon, and then take 15 mouthfuls or handfuls of food that day, and 14 the next day, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, till you get to the new moon, fast completely on the day of the new moon, and then again start taking more food, one handful, 2 handfuls, 3 handfuls, or 2 mouthfuls, up till you get to the full moon, where you're taking 15. And if you do that, that takes a whole month, and you lose a lot of weight because you're basically fasting. You're eating only one time a day, and you're eating only 15, 14, 13, 12, sometimes nothing. And in this way, this is a type of fasting which people still do today, and it's called Chandrayana fasting. Chandra means the moon, Ayana means following the moon. So it's a type of fast that follows the moon. If you follow the different lunar days, and you know how many handfuls of food to eat on each day, and it decreases and then it increases back to the 15. Because there are 30 lunar tithis in a month, lunar days in a month. Okay, so the gerund form is Prityaja, is not a statement, is not like the statement, having eaten something forbidden, perform the month-long fast, Chandrayana, for expiation. Okay, so there are these 2 rules here. Having bathed, take food. And the other thing is, having eaten something forbidden, do the prayaschita, do the atonement by doing this fast, this Chandrayana fast for expiation. Rather, it is like the injunction, vidhi, having bathed, one should take food. Okay, so we have these 2 types of things. So what's the difference between these 2? This gives an order that when one takes food, one first has to take bath and then eat, right? Whereas the other rule says, having eaten something forbidden, you don't have to eat something forbidden. There are many people who never eat anything forbidden. They know that certain thing is forbidden, like meat or liquor or whatever it is, and they don't eat it. They know that from the scripture, they don't eat it. So they don't have to do the fast because they've never done the sin. They've never committed the sin of eating the improper thing, right? So this is not, but whereas in this other rule, having bathed, one should take food. One must take, everybody has to eat. Everybody has to take food. So you have to take food, right? And you have to take bath before taking food. This is a prerequisite. Whereas there's no prerequisite that somebody, if I read in the scripture, having eaten something forbidden, one should do the month-long fast, then I shouldn't just say, oh, well, it says in the scripture, I should go eat something forbidden and then do the fast. No, you don't have to go and do that. You don't have to go and do that. So what he's saying here is, you don't have to try karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga as a means and fail. You can immediately surrender to the Lord. That's the point. That's the point being made. This gives an order that when one takes food, one has to first take a bath and then eat. Here, this gerund form, verbal noun form, or prityaja, gives the order that when we accept the Lord as the upaya, as the means, the Lord himself, in property, the Lord himself is the means. It's not even our surrender which is the means. The Lord himself is the means. He's going to take care of our liberation. He takes it upon himself to do everything to make our liberation, our attaining moksha successful. So this is called siddhopaya. Siddha means perfection. Upaya means means. So the siddha upaya, the perfect means, is God himself, is the Lord himself. That's the perfect means. Why is that the perfect means? Because The other means depends upon us, depends upon our qualification, depends upon our ability, means our not only our qualification, but our actual performing of the different efforts in the different processes of karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, and also may take a longer time, right? More than one lifetime, and has to be done to perfection. All of these things, karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. You have to be qualified. You need a qualified teacher to teach you. You have to make the efforts yourself. Those efforts take longer than property, right? It may take more than one lifetime, and they have to be done until you're completely pure and perfect in that thing, and then only will you attain liberation. Whereas this other system of property, right, where the Lord Himself is the person who is charged with saving you, right? It's completely up to Him. He's the perfect person. He's completely qualified. He doesn't need any training from a guru. He doesn't need to find a perfect guru, right? He is the one who's going to put in the effort to save you like that. And he must be successful. And he can be successful in a short time within this lifetime, by the end of this lifetime. So, and he promises that also in his different Charma slokas, in his final orders, in the Ramayana, in the Vraha Purana, the Ramacharma sloka, Vraha Charma sloka, and here in the Gita, Krishna Charma sloka, he promises that at the end of this lifetime, moksha. So, the Jaren form of the Prityaja gives the order that when we accept the Lord as the upaya, the siddhopaya, the perfect means, these other means are not perfect because they're dependent upon so many things, so many prerequisites. We must first relinquish other upayas, which have to be given up, and only then accept them. Only then accept the Lord as the upaya, as the siddhopaya, the perfect means. So, parityaja, we understand what tyaj means, to abandon. We know that pari means completely abandon, which includes different tendencies that we had to recommit sin, and includes our shame and our regret and everything. Not just giving up the sin itself, doing that activity, but giving up the desire and giving up the tendencies, right? So we understood that. We understood pari and we understood tyaja. And now we're understanding the gerund form, which is the third part of this word, right? To mean that it is an order like having taken bath, one takes food. One has to take food. It is compulsory, unlike this other statement. It's not compulsory to eat forbidden food, right? It's compulsory to take bath before eating food. So it's compulsory to give up karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga as means to liberation. As a means to liberation. You don't have to give up work, you don't have to give up study, you don't have to give up devotion, but you have to give up the idea that these things are going to lead you to liberation, are going to cause your liberation. You have to give them up as a means in order to accept the perfect means, which is God Himself, Sriman Narayana. He is the siddhopaya. So that's what's being taught here. So there's also a footnote here. Let's have a look at the footnote. This is a long footnote because it's going to get again into the difference between the northern and southern schools of Sri Vaishnavism, the Wadagalis and Tengalais, right? So the interpretation of meaning of the participle form of parityaja, the gerund form, is hotly disputed by the Tengalai and Wadagalai acharyas. The question is whether having relinquished is to be taken as a vidhi or an injunction, or an anuvada, or a statement of a condition that has already come about. These are the two things, vidhi and anuvada. Vidhi is an injunction, which must be done, which must be performed. Anuvada is simply a statement of a condition that you find yourself in because you already abandoned these other means. The question is legitimate since Sanskrit grammar supports both interpretations. As illustrated in the passages cited here, if the Dharmashastra text says having bathed one should take food, then bathing is being ordered along with eating, one is first to bathe and then take food. Thus, in this case, the participle form stands for an injunction or a vidi. In the statement, having eaten something forbidden, do the month-long fast, eating forbidden things is not being enjoined along with its expiation. So it's not compulsory to go out and eat. Once you read this rule in the scriptures, it's not compulsory to go out and eat something forbidden. Rather, it is if one has eaten something forbidden, then one should do the fast. Thus, the participle form in the first clause must be taken as a statement of what has actually occurred, or an anuvada. In the context of Bhagavad Gita, these alternatives for interpreting Charmasloka's Parityaja have important doctrinal implications. Is Krishna ordering Arjuna to give up all other means, all other upayas? This is what Manavala Mahamuni and the Tengalai Southern School Acharyas conclude by taking Parityaja as a vidi, as a rule, as an injunction. They argue that Bhakti Yoga and the like are not really proper means, right, or upayas at all, but impediments to moksha, because they demand that one make efforts to save himself, are contrary to the soul's dependence, complete and utter dependence on the Lord. Complete surrender to the Lord himself as one's savior, recognizing that he is the only true means to moksha, is in keeping with the soul's complete and utter dependent nature. This is what is enjoined in the last line of Charmasloka. What's the last line of Charmasloka? Sarvam Pritija, Mamekam Sharanam Pritija, Ham Tva Sarva Papebhyo, Moksha Mishami, Masuchaha. Masuchaha means don't worry, don't grieve, grieve not, right? Don't worry. Don't worry means you don't have to worry about your liberation. God is taking care of your liberation. So, do you have to do Karma Yoga? No. Do you have to do Bhakti Yoga? No. Do you have to do Jnana Yoga? No. You don't have to worry about those things because God is the perfect upaya. He's the perfect means. And therefore, Lord Krishna says, fear not. Don't worry about it. No worries. He says, no worries. So, the Vadagalai school prefers to interpret Parityaja as an anuvada. What's an anuvada? It's like an if-then clause. Right? It's a statement that something has already occurred. Vedanta Deshika argues that outright renunciation of Bhakti Yoga and its accessories is not being ordered here. Bhakti Yoga is fully in keeping with the soul's capacity to act on its own and is a valid upaya, is a valid means. Right? After all, these are being ordered in the scriptures. The scripture says, do Karma Yoga, Lord Krishna preaches it to Arjuna, spends the whole Bhagavad Gita arguing, saying, here's Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. So Vedanta Deshika takes it as a valid upaya. Of course, this is only theoretical because Vedanta Deshika doesn't perform these things. And he doesn't tell his followers to perform these things. And no Vadagalai does Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Bhakti Yoga, even though they're very qualified according to the scriptures and according to their rules and regulations. They're totally qualified to perform these things. But yet they don't do them. But yet he argues that they are perfect, that they are ways to liberation. So it's only theoretical for Vedanta Deshika as well. It's a theoretical argument that he's putting forward, which the Lord has enjoined. Okay, so that these are valid upayas, right, which the Lord has enjoined in many scriptures for those who are qualified for it or for them. Rather, Krishna here is recognizing that Arjuna, on account of his impatience to attain the Lord. What did I say again about Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga? They take a long time. They take a long time, right? They may take more than one lifetime. They involve a lot of effort. So the point being made here is that on account of Arjuna's impatience, Vedanta Deshika says Arjuna is impatient. He wants the result. And so therefore Krishna says, okay, I will give you a shortcut method. I've told you these other methods, and these other methods work too. But I'm giving you a shortcut method. If you're so impatient, I'll give you a very shortcut method, and that is property. Just surrender to me. Like that. That's the point being made here by Vedanta Deshika, which is, fair enough. Like that. When we talk to people who follow other paths of Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, we don't discourage them. Because if they have the mentality that I have to do this in order to attain liberation, I have to chant this mantra, I have to follow these rules, I have to do this ceremony, I have to do this particular thing, then only, because it says in the scriptures, do it. I have to go to, Lord Krishna says, go to the forest, sit on a deer skin, look at the tip of the nose. He says that in Bhagavad Gita. So if he says it, we should go do it, right? Is there anybody doing it? Lord Krishna says to do it. So there may be some people out there who are doing it and thinking this is the way to liberation. Yeah, and maybe if they do it perfectly over many lifetimes, maybe it is the way to liberation, like that. But Vedanta Deshika is saying here that because Arjuna was impatient, didn't want to go to the forest and meditate, he didn't want to do all these things that Krishna had proposed, all these different yogas. They involved time and effort. Right? So because he was impatient, Krishna gave him a shortcut method. So that's what he's saying. So rather, Krishna is recognizing that Arjuna, on account of his impatience to attain the Lord, is not qualified for the time-consuming path of Bhakti Yoga and has already given it up. This qualifies him for the alternative upaya, the quick and easy and safe alternative. Property or surrender to the Lord, which Krishna enjoins in the next line, right? So what's the first line? Sarvadharman Pariteja. Next line. Mam ekam sharanam bhaja. Sharanam means to surrender, right? Mam ekam means Krishna saying, surrender unto me only to me. Just surrender unto me only. Right? So that's the next line. Next line of Charmasoka. As a quick and easy way to attain the supreme goal. Now, this is being explained. This point is explained more by in Rahasya Trayasarma Vedanta Deshika, chapter 20, pages 1036, etc. Right. So that is the footnote there. So again, we very much got into this discussion of the difference between the Vatagalized and Tangalized, but we should always remember on Vishishtadvaita they're the same, and they differ on these slight differences of opinion here on these intricate doctrines. But in actual fact, in practical reality, it makes no difference, because neither Vatagalized nor Tangalized follow Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, or Jnana Yoga. They all follow property. They all perform property. So it's only theoretical that Vedanta Deshika says one can follow Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, or Jnana Yoga. He doesn't actually suggest that people should do that, even if they're qualified. He just says the Lord has preached it, therefore it's in the scripture, therefore we accept it as being bona fide. If you really want to go do that, go do it, like that. But he never suggested that is the best way. Even Arjuna, who was so qualified, such a qualified Kshatriya, such a qualified, military man, he was impatient and he said, no, this is not for me. Karma Yoga is not for me. Jnana Yoga is not for me. Bhakti Yoga is not for me. Only property. Property is the way. So he reveals the import behind this idea that we have to first relinquish and then seek refuge. Okay, so now the purport of that idea. So we understand that Pillai Lokacharya and Manavala Mahamuni with the southern acharyas, the Tengalai Sri Vaishnavas, have put forward this idea that parityaja is a vidi, is an injunction that one must give up these things. One must have to give up the mentality that these things are means to liberation. That's what you have to give up. You have to give up doing bhakti, karma, or jnana. You have to give up the mentality that bhakti yoga, karma yoga, and jnana yoga can lead to liberation. That's what you have to give up. So, what is the purport of that? Once you agree and you accept that it's a vidi and not an anuvad, it's not a statement of something that's already happened, but it's an actual injunction that you have to follow, then what? We'll see that in the next sloka, but first let's see what Tibi and Angacharya has to say about this particular thing. So we go back to the other point, the other part. So he says here, what does the upasarga, hari, attached to tyaja, say? When giving up the great sins and those things that should be discarded, the attachment and the taste for those things should also be given up, such as the interest in them never comes back. So we discussed that before. When giving up these other means, they too should be given up in the same way, as well as with shame, such as the association with them never comes back. Like the condition that when one has to bathe before eating, the siddhopayam, or the perfect means, can be followed only after giving up the other means. It is a vidhi, it is an injunction. This is why it is said by the ya in tyajya. This is the ya ending, right? So the verbal root is tyaj, comes from the verb tyaj. Tyaga is the noun. Tyaja, tyaj is the verb. When you add ya to it, it means that it's a injunction. It could also mean it's a statement of fact, an anuvad, but in this case, it's an injunction. Vedanta Deshika says it's an anuvad. The Tengalayacharya, Pilokacharya, they say it's a vidhi. It's an injunction. Okay. So continuing on. Why should one follow? Well, first of all, go back to the main text, and we'll see what is the result of this mentality, right? Text 203. It says that these are not only non-upayas, right? So that the Southern School Acharyas, the Tengalai Sri Vaishnava Acharyas, Pilokacharya and Malabar Muni are saying that these other things, Kama Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, are non-upayas. They are not the means. They are not the actual means to liberation. They only appear to be means. But impediments, as in the statement, shaking the hero dropped the bow. Shaking the hero dropped the bow. So this comes from this statement. Then it says here, the king, Ravana, this is a quotation from the Ramayana, was not shaken by the fall of the thunderbolt on his chest, nor did he move. But when struck by Rama's arrow, he became agitated. Shaking the hero dropped the bow. That's the full statement from the Ramayana, and it comes from the 6th canto, 47th chapter, 132nd verse of the Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana. Okay, so Ravana, overwhelmed by Rama's archery, became agitated and tried to escape. But as long as he held the bow, Rama did not allow him to leave, right? So, okay, the bow which he eventually dropped was not an effective means or sadhana, right, or upaya. So he had this bow in his hands as if he wanted to fight Rama. As long as he was holding the bow, sort of like as long as, when people are fighting with swords, as long as the other person is holding the sword, right, you think that he wants to fight and you fight him. So here, Ravana was holding the bow. As long as he was holding the bow, Rama continued to fight with it, like that, right? Not only that, but the permission Rama later gave him, saying, I will let you go. I will let you go. So there's a variant reading in the Ramayana of that last verse was 6th canto, 47th chapter, 129th verse. This one, this reading is 6th canto, 47th chapter, 132nd verse of the Valmiki Ramayana. Okay, I will let you go. Rama says to him that he will let Ravana go. But obviously, when you let the other person go, the person has to first of all put down their weapon. They have to put down his sword, or they have to put down their bow. If they still have their bow, if they still have their weapon, and it's like, when the police approach a person who's a criminal and the criminal has a gun, they say, put your gun down. And if he doesn't put his gun down, then he hasn't surrendered, and they're going to shoot him if he continues to hold the gun, right? If he puts the gun down, puts his hands up, then that's real surrender. See, he may say, I'm surrendering, but if he's still holding the gun, he's not surrendering. right? That shows that he's not surrendering. So we may say that we're surrendering to God, but if we still cling to the notion that karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga are going to save us, then we're not fully surrendered to God. That's the point being made here. So not only that, but the permission Rama gave him later saying, I will let you go, was not given during the time he was holding the bow. So according to this reading of the Ramayana, right, Rama said, I will let you go to Ravana. He said, I will let you go. But he only said, I will let you go when Ravana was not holding the bow. Just like the cops will say, we won't do anything. We won't kill you. We won't hurt you. But you have to put the gun down first. Right? So, thus the bow can be said to be an impediment which kept him from leaving. In the same way, if there remains even the slightest involvement in these other upayas, if there's the slightest thought that we have that we're being saved by doing these other things, that actually the Lord, of course, we have to get the grace of the Lord, but it has to be cooperative grace. We have to cooperate with the Lord. We have to do our karma yoga. We have to do our jnana yoga. We have to do our bhakti yoga. If we don't chant these mantras, if we don't do these rituals, if we don't do all these things, then we can't attain liberation, right? Because the Lord's expecting us, he's telling us to do all these things in the scriptures, and we have to do those things. If we don't do those things, he won't save us. So it's a bargain. It's we do this and he does that, right? There has to be some activity from us like that, right? That is not property. That is not the system of property, right? As long as we think that our own individual effort is important or is separate, right? As long as we think there has to be a separate effort by the soul, that is an impediment. That is considered an impediment by the Tengala Sri Vaishnavas. So, even a little bit. So, in the same way, if there remains even the slightest involvement in these other paths of effort, these paths of ego, right? Self-ego, of self-effort, right? The slightest involvement in these other upayas, they will not only fail to be effective means to the goal, they will actually turn out to be obstructions to the ultimate attainment. Right. Okay. So there's another example in the Ramayana, which we may come across here. I'm not sure, but I think we discussed it also when we were reading Srivachana Bhushana, which is the next book after this, which we did in the wrong order for some reason. Somebody wanted to study that book first, so we did that. So, but there's this story about Hanuman. Hanuman went to Sri Lanka. He went to the kingdom of Ravana to meet Sita and to give the ring of Rama to Sita, which was the message that Rama was okay and he was going to come and rescue her. And Hanuman was captured by the Rakshasas. He was actually taken prisoner, and they had a special mantra that they said that bound him up. They bound him up with a mantra sort of a spell, and he was bound up with the mantra spell. Now, some of them thought, maybe what if the mantra spell doesn't hold him? He's a pretty powerful person. Maybe he'll get out from this mantra spell and he'll be able to wreak havoc. So what they did was they took an ordinary rope also and tied him up, sort of like a person who would wear a belt to keep his trousers up, but then also wear suspenders, which is another way of keeping the pants up. So just in case, he's got these two things. The point was that Hanuman escaped because of that. He escaped because the mantra bonds that he was put under, the spell that was put on him to make him be contained, right, to be held captive, right? The spell only works if you have faith in it, right? The spell only works if you have faith in it. If you have no faith in it, the spell doesn't work. So by putting the rope, the ordinary rope around Hanuman, as well as the spell, the Rakshasas were in fact having doubts about the spell. They were saying, we doubt whether the spell is going to hold him, so let's put a rope around as well. When they started to doubt the spell, right, the spell didn't work. and therefore Hanuman broke the ropes. The ordinary ropes were easy for him to break, and he escaped. So this is the story in the Ramayana. So the idea is, if you put your faith in these things, if you put your faith in Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga as the thing which is going to save you, right? Then you cannot attain the goal. The goal was to keep Hanuman tied up. But they put their faith in the rope, the ordinary rope, but they lost faith in the actual thing that would keep him tied up, which was the mantra spell. In the Bible, it's also said you can't serve two masters. So if you're completely subservient to the Supreme Person, to Sriman Narayana, you can't also serve your own ego and think that you have you are also in some way, shape, or form, even however slight, the means of your own salvation. You're not. You can't be. And that's what the Tengalayacharya is trying to say here. So, using the example, he further reveals how engaging in these makes for loss. So what Pilalokacharya and Manavala Mahamuni are saying here, somebody might think, like the Rakshasas. They think like the Rakshasas, or we'll put the rope on as well as the mantra spell on Hanuman, and that'll make sure that or a man may think, I'll wear the suspenders, I'll wear the belt, I'll wear both, and then my pants will definitely not fall down, because if one breaks, the other one will catch, right? Like that. But the point the Tengalayacharya are making here is, if you put faith you either have faith in total surrender of the Lord, or you have faith in these other means. If you have faith in these other means, then you're not giving up these other means. But we've already said that we accept that the word Prichaja means you must give up these other means. You have to give up these other means in order to be totally surrendered or fully surrendered to the Lord. That full surrender to the Lord will only work if you give up those other means. Okay. So let's see what P.B. Anangacharya has to say about that particular part. So he says here, why should one follow this means only after giving up the other means? In other words, why don't we do all of them? Why don't we do Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and we'll also do property. We'll also surrender. This is what the Bhakti Yogis say. They say surrender is not a separate thing. It's part of Bhakti, right? We hear from Prahlad Maharaj in the Bhagavatam, in the Bhagavad Purana. He says, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmanivedanam. Atmanivedanam means offering, surrendering to the Lord, surrendering myself to the Lord. So Atmanivedanam is a part of Bhakti. It's one of the 9 forms of Bhakti. That's what they say, right? So they think property is just that. Sharanagati is just that Atmanivedanam. It's not the same thing as Atmanivedanam according to the Sri Vaishnavas. Atmanivedanam, you can surrender to God as part of Bhakti Yoga. But that surrender isn't a full surrender, because in Bhakti Yoga there has to be some individual effort. So individual effort means there has to be some separate mentality, slight separate mentality. So it is a part of can be a part of Bhakti Yoga, this type of surrender, but it's not full surrender to the Lord, right? There's an iota of ego there involved, self-effort. So here's the question. The question being posed is, why should we give up these other things, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga? We're not giving up. Understand, the Tengalayas are not giving up karma, jnana, and bhakti. We're not giving up works, knowledge, and devotion. We accept those things. We don't accept them as a means to liberation. What was being asked here is, why can't we have all these 4 means? Why can't we accept the means of karma, jnana, bhakti, and property? Why don't we accept all these 4 means, right? So I'll just finish this and I'll deal with the question. Even if there is a small association with these other means, not only will it not take one to liberation, but it will also be a hindrance to the goal, which is liberation. There is an example of this. Ravana, who was attacked by Sri Rama's fierce arrows, was unable to raise even one arrow and stood in despair. But the arrows from Sri Rama did not stop and kept continuing to fall upon him. Ravana began to wonder why Sri Rama, who is known, who knew the dharma of war, who knew how to do a righteous type of war, has not stopped his attack when Ravana was unable to fight back. Right? Rama just kept shooting arrows at Ravana because he kept the bow in his hand. The cops will shoot you if you don't drop the gun. Right? That's the point. Right? You have to give up the other means before you can totally surrender. So then he realized that it was because he is still holding the bow in his hand. Ravana was still holding the bow in his hand. So he dropped that too. At that point, Sri Rama stopped his attack and asked him to go back and return the next day. So that other quotation that I told you about, where Rama says, I will say, Rama was willing not to kill Ravana. He was willing to, if Ravana actually surrendered to him, he was willing to accept him. Of course, that didn't happen. But as soon as he dropped the bow, then Rama stopped. Right? Rama stopped his attack and asked him to come back and return the next day. The bow, which was in his hand, was a tool for him to defeat his enemies. Karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, these are tools, these are upayas, these are means to liberation taught in the scriptures, right? But if we don't give up those means, we can't adopt the other means. The other means is completely relying on the Lord. If we're still relying on ourselves, we cannot be fully relying on the Lord. Simple as that. Beyond that, it was also the reason for suffering at the hand of the Lord. The divine words, Gachanu Janami, did not come out till he dropped the bow. Right? Therefore, it is clear that it acted as an obstacle. His holding the bow, Ravana's holding the bow, was an obstacle to Rama stopping the onslaught. The other means are also the same. If there is even the slightest attachment to karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga as means to liberation, they will hinder the flow of divine grace. Okay, so let's go back to the other one. Before we do that, we'll see what's being said here. Got to go, great class. Okay, thank you. Let's go back and continue on with. We're going to continue on with the next sloka. Okay, so now text 204. As with the emperor, these make for loss. The emperor Dasaratha lost the fortune he had living with Rama, who is said to be the Dharma incarnate, by clinging to the Dharma of truthfulness, which was only a semblance of Dharma. Abhasamana. Thinking that he could not refuse to honor a vow he had previously granted. In the same way, remaining engaged in the other illusory means, abhasamana arankal, right, will certainly make for loss of a great fortune of living with the divine being. In other words, attaining moksha and serving Supreme Lord by Vaikuntha eternally. Bhagavad Vishaya. The eternal Dharma himself declared to be Krishna, the eternal Dharma. And this is a quote from Bhagavad Gita, I believe, and or Mahabharata. Right? After this, in order to respond to the fault pointed out by those ignorant of the true intention of the command to relinquish all dharmas, he brings up their argument. So now he's going to talk about the argument of the people who, like Vedanta Deshika, say not to give up these other upayas, right? But first of all, he's talking about Dasarath. Now, Dasarath was the father of Rama in the Ramayana, and he had promised his wife, one of his wives, that she could have a boon, and she asked for the boon of sending Rama away to the forest for 14 years. So Rama is Dharma incarnate. He is religiosity incarnate. He is the epitome of everything true and great and honorable. And Dasarath was living with him, and he sent him away. So he had this great treasure, and he sent him away because he thought, I have to keep my promise that I made. Even though my wife is asking me for something which is wrong, I have to somehow keep my promise like that. So he's saying, clinging to the Dharma of truthfulness, which was only a semblance of Dharma, right? Thinking that he could not refuse to honor a vow he had previously granted, right? So he had this lower idea, just like Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita has this lower idea of religiosity, that I can't kill my teachers and my friends and my relatives who are on the other side of this battle. But Lord Krishna says, you are grieving like a foolish person who doesn't understand spiritual things. And he's telling him, no, you have to do your duty. You have to fight the war like that. So there is a higher Dharma and a lower Dharma. There's a higher responsibility and a higher duty and religiosity than this lower duty like that. So similarly, our surrender to the Lord, our total surrender to the Lord is the highest duty. It's the highest duty. And our in any way thinking ourselves separate from the Lord, right? That is an impediment to that. Like that. Okay, so let's see what P.V. Anangacharya says about this particular. So, attachment to other means will result in loss of the goal, right? What is the goal? The goal is moksha. The goal is eternal service to the Lord and Sri Vaikuntha. Is also seen through another example. Dasaratha stuck to the Satya Dharma, the principle of truthfulness, and lost the goal of living with Sri Rama. As in Rama Vigrahavan Dharmaha. So Rama Vigrahavan Ram Dharmaha means that Rama is the embodiment of Dharma. So Datharath, in order to have his little Dharma of truthfulness to his vow to his wife, gave up the most important Dharma, which is embodied in his son Rama. He should have stayed with Rama, who is Dharma personified, and given the ordinary Dharma of keeping his word up. Instead, he decided to keep his lowly Dharma of fulfilling his promise. Therefore, he lost the Lord. Similarly, sticking to the lowly means, right? So the Tengalai Sri Vaishnavas describe Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and even Bhakti Yoga as lowly means. They are unfit for the soul, actually, because they don't go with the true nature of the soul, which is complete and utter dependence on the Lord. So sticking to the lowly means will result in losing the great goal of being with him, who is Dharma incarnate, right? And the actual statement here is Krishnam Dharmam Sanatanam, which comes from the Mahabharata, 3rd canto, 86th chapter, verse 22 of the Mahabharata. Krishnam Dharmam Sanatanam. Krishna is Dharma. Rama is Dharma. They are Dharma incarnate. So whatever Krishna says is Dharma. So Arjuna should have known that. When Krishna said, go, fight, kill your enemies, kill your teachers, kill your friends. And Arjuna said, no, how can I do that? That's not Dharma. Krishna said, that is a higher Dharma. Krishna said, that is a higher Dharma than the Dharma that you are thinking of, these ordinary Dharmas. You have to think of the highest Dharma. Krishna is the highest Dharma. Rama is the highest Dharma. So this breaking promises or keeping your word or fulfilling your promise or anything like that was a lower Dharma, right? Even Krishna lied in the Battle of Kurukshetra. He tried to get Yudhisthira to lie. Yudhisthira didn't want to lie. He didn't want to say Ashwatthama was dead so that they could kill Ashwatthama's father, Jayadratha. So there was an elephant named also Ashwatthama. So the elephant died. And so Yudhisthira said, Ashwatthama is dead, be he man or elephant, I I know not which. So he sort of told a fib and said, I don't know who actually died, but I know something died called Ashvatthama, like that. So therefore, it was he wanted to get Jayadratha's attention and break the spell that he was under, so that he could kill him by having him feel that his son had died. But it was really an elephant called Ashvatthama that had died. So Krishna knew that Yudhisthira couldn't actually tell a lie, so he knew that he would explain it. He would explain it by saying, be he man or elephant, I don't know. So as soon as he said Ashvatthama is dead, Krishna and all of them blew their conch shells so nobody could hear the rest of it, what Yudhisthira was saying. Yudhisthira wouldn't tell a lie. But actually, Krishna wanted him to tell a lie, and he should have told a lie, because Krishna is the supreme Dharma. So is Rama. And Arjuna should have known that also in the beginning of the Gita. And when he surrendered in the beginning of the Gita to get knowledge from Krishna like a guru, he could have surrendered completely and just said, I'll do whatever you want. But he didn't. And Krishna taught him all these other things. But he finally gave them up. Right. So Krishnam Dharmam Sanatanam. So let's go back and let's see the next sutra in the main text. Okay, so we talked about this, and so now, after this, in order to respond to the fault pointed out by those ignorant of the true intention of the command, what's the command again? Sarva Dharmam Parityaja is the command. It's a command. It's a vidi. It's something that has to be done. You have to give up the idea that Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga are going to save you and going to take you to moksha. They're not. Only the Lord can save you. That's it. Right. So in order to respond to the fault pointed out by those ignorant of the true intention of the command to relinquish all dharmas, he brings up their argument. So what is the opposite argument to this? Let's look. We've given the Southern Sri Vaishnava Acharyas, the Tengalai Acharyas argument. Now let's look at what the other people say, their argument, see if that makes sense, or if that makes better sense than what we've just said. Right? So some argue that by saying to relinquish all dharmas, adharma will come about. Okay, so this is another thing that Vedanta Deshika says, and they say, oh, if you say to give up karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, what are you saying? Just sit around and watch TV all day. Just do sinful activities. If you're saying to give up dharmas, then you're saying maybe do adharmas. Maybe adharmas will come in. You've got to do something. So if you give up dharmas, maybe you're going to be doing sins. That's not good, right? This is the idea that people say. This is where people criticize Protestants. Protestants say, oh, I accept Jesus in my heart. I'm fully surrendered to Jesus, like that. And they say, oh, but what about doing good works? It means you don't do any good works. You commit all sorts of sins, and you just surrender to God and he saves you, right? That's a bit of a cop-out. And they say the same thing about the Tengalai Sri Vaishnavas. They say, oh, you say that we have to give up karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, all these things, but we have to give up doing all these good things which are told in the scriptures by Krishna to do. We don't say give them up, doing the activities. We say give up the mentality that those activities will save you, right? That's the difference. But here, so the criticism comes that, okay, if you give up all those things, then maybe you get sin may creep in. You may be doing some other things which are not dharmic at all, which are adharmic, against dharma. So the dharmas which are to be rejected consist of injunctions and prohibitions, what we call in Sanskrit yamas and niyamas. So we have rules so that we don't commit sins of commission or omission. So there are sins of commission. If I do something sinful, it's a sin of commission. If I don't do something which I was supposed to do, right, that's a sin of omission. Right, there's these two types of sins, do's and don'ts, right? Right, so the dharmas which are to be rejected consist of injunctions and prohibitions saying do this and don't do that. Therefore, when the statement to relinquish all dharmas throws out the avoidance of prohibited actions along with the performance of the injunctions, then the performance of prohibited actions will enter in. This is their argument. Just as some vile creature like a dog will enter the house if the door is left open, right? So usually in India, they keep the dogs out of the house, right? So if you have a dog, it's outside the house. You don't let the dog inside the house because it's considered a dirty animal. Okay, so but if you leave the door open, the dog's going to just walk in. So what he's saying is by giving up all dharmas, if you say give up all these dharmas, Kama Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, the dog's going to walk in. You're going to have sin come in. Such an argument some people make, but he refutes that as incorrect. Let's hear the refutation. This is wrong, since it does not say to do adharmas. The injunction is to give up dharmas, give up these so-called dharmas. They're not real dharmas. They're so-called dharmas because they can't actually lead to moksha. Only the Lord can give moksha, right? If we rely on ourselves, we can never attain moksha. So they're actually not real upayas. They're not real means, right? They're non-upayas, actually. Right? And therefore they have to be given up. Just like Ravana had to give up his bow before Rama would stop fighting him. Just like a person has to drop the gun or the police will kill him. Right? You have to give up other means. Like Dasarath should have given up. He should have given up his vow to keep his promise to his wife and kept Rama there. But instead he opted for the lower form of dharma, the lower form of religiosity, just as Arjuna wanted to in the beginning of the Gita. He wanted to opt for the lower religiosity of not fighting with his teachers and his friends and his relatives on the battlefield out of some mistaken idea that society would be ruined, right? This is wrong, since it does not say to do adharmas. There is no injunction in the Charma Sloka of Krishna or in any of the Charma Slokas to do sins or even to do pious activities, right? There is no injunction to do something which would involve getting karma for doing that action and staying here in this material world. There is no injunction in the Charma Sloka of Krishna to say go and do adharma, do sins, there's no, when you say give up karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, nobody's saying you should go out and do what's opposite of those things, right? Be an atheist or be a sense enjoyer or be all these sort of irreligious things, do irreligious things. The assertion that our dharmas will enter does not follow from the statement to relinquish dharmas, right? Since it does not say that to do adharmas or non-dharmas, right? But merely to relinquish those dharmas, which are not really dharmas anyway. They're not really means. They're not really proper means. But since refraining from adharmas, right, irreligious means, is implied by the word dharma. If he says to relinquish dharmas, isn't it implied that one should do adharmas? Pillai Lokacharya states the view of the opponent here, right? And then he says, if it be argued that this is stated automatically, so somebody can continue to argue. It's automatic. It's automatic. If you stop doing karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, automatically you're going to be doing nonsense. You're going to be doing something sinful. You've heard so many arguments like this people come up with, right? He reveals the answer to this and he says, we reply, it is not, because the word dharma does not indicate refraining from adharmas. It is not correct to say that this statement to relinquish dharma automatically means to do adharmas. This is because the word dharma generally does not mean refraining from adharmas. It's a positive thing. Rather, it refers primarily to prescribed actions, which are accompanied by their ancillary actions, their angas, right, their limbs, as such as refraining from adharmas. So one of the limbs or one of the ancillary things that goes along with performing dharma is giving up adharma. Even if the word dharma does not primarily refer to refraining from adharmas, okay, maybe it doesn't primarily, right? Secondarily, it means to give up adharmas. doesn't the fact that it is modified by the word sarva necessarily imply this? He reveals, even if this is so, right? Even if this is so, here it means something other than that. Even if it can mean that, it does not mean that in this context. Thus, it refers only to these dharmas in the form of prescribed actions and not to refraining from adharmas. So there's a footnote here. Right. Okay, so it says here, since it has been stated above that all the angas of Bhakti Yoga, all the different parts of Bhakti Yoga, what are the angas of Bhakti Yoga? It is Navada Bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishwasmaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasam, Satmanam, Atmanivedanam, these Navada Bhakti. Hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, offering prayers, bowing down before, surrendering everything, becoming a friend, like that. These are different angas of Bhakti Yoga. Have been included in the command to even if it's said that all the angas of Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga, such as Nitya Naimitika karmas, like doing Sandhya Vandana, doing our daily and occasional rituals, following Ekadasi fasting, all this sort of stuff, right? Have been included in the command to relinquish all dharmas. Even if we say that, even if, let's say the person comes to us and argues that Krishna, you're saying Krishna says to give up dharmas, and that means give up Bhakti Yoga, but part of Bhakti Yoga is chanting mantras, is doing our Sandhya Vandana, is following Ekadasi fast, and should we give all those things up? That's not good, right? Right. So even if that's accepted, right, has been included in the command to relinquish all dharmas, it does not seem consistent here to argue that refraining from adharmas is not implied, because avoidance of wrongdoing is only an anga of dharma. So it's a limb of dharma. Dharma itself doesn't say give up sinful activities. If I say go and chant the mantras and be this like that, it means give up the sinful activities. It's an anga. It doesn't directly say that, but it's implied, right? However, this position can be supported with the Tengalite view that refraining from action is not itself an action. Refraining from action is not itself an action, and therefore cannot be seen as a dharma, sadhana, or upaya, right? Dharma, sadhana, upaya, all things leading to moksha, right? All words that are implied which imply positive self-effort and activity. So this is also another, criticism that people criticize, and they say, oh, okay, you're saying give up all positive effort, but you're making an effort to surrender. No, that's not an effort. That's not an effort. Vedanta Deshika says that's an effort. No, it's not an effort. That's not an effort. That's simply a realization of our nature as completely and utterly dependent and supported by the Lord. Right? That's a non-activity. If we say, I work very hard to surrender to the Lord, that's wrong. We're not working very hard to surrender to the Lord. Surrender to the Lord is very easy. According to Ramacharma Sloka, he says, Sakrideva Prapannaya Tavasmiti Tuyachite. If I just say one time that I am yours, right, only one time, then he will save me. Like that. Even if I don't think of him at the time of death, Lord Vraha says, he will save me. He will think of me. Like that. So it's not dependent upon my actions. And there is no action even in surrendering. There is only just a realization that I'm the property, I'm the slave, I'm the servant of the Lord. And therefore, he is the one who is totally in charge of my situation, and he is the one who is going to save me. He's going to give me, he's the one who's going to act and give me liberation. I'm not acting at all. I'm just passively accepting. So there's active, cooperative grace through doing Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. That's one path. And then there's passive, completely passive, causeless, irresistible grace of the Tengalite Sri Vaishnavas, which is the system of property as we understand it. So it's a non-activity property, really. So using this same argument, they deny the property which consists only of relinquishing action and recognizing the Lord as the means, as the upaya, is a sadhana or upaya. Right? So people say that. The same argument, they deny the property, which consists of actually relinquishing action, not doing anything, right? and simply recognizing the Lord as a savior, right, as the upaya, as the means, is a sadhana or upaya. Vedanta Deshika, however, argues that even refraining from action, this is Vedanta Deshika's response, refraining from action, nivritti, is still an action, pravritti. So that he's trying to use logic on that and say, look, even if you refrain from doing something, that's doing something. No, it's not doing something. Involving knowledge is an action involving knowledge, will, and effort. So in Rahasyatrayasara, chapter 29, page 1045, and in chapter 5, page 140, he mentions this. Vedanta Deshika puts forward that argument. Thus, he rejects the Tengalayacharya's contention that property is not an act and therefore not an upaya or sadhana. Remember when we were studying Srivachanabhushana, we understood that property itself is seen as an upaya, it's seen as a means to liberation, but in fact it's not the primary means. The primary means of liberation is the Lord himself. The initial means is doing the property, approaching the guru. There are many initial means. Controlling the mind, controlling the senses. The Lord will send you a guru, send you an acharya, send someone to help you to perform the property, right? Or maybe you can perform property yourself. It's possible if you understand the process yourself, you can perform property just as Draupadi and Vibhishana and Gajendra did. They did their properties without the means of Panchasamskara and an acharya helping them. But in most cases, people take the help of an acharya, and the acharya becomes, therefore, the controlling the mind and body becomes a means. It becomes an initial means. Approaching an acharya, taking Panchasamskara becomes an initial means. Getting the Astakshara mantra and chanting and understanding the meaning of Astakshara mantra becomes an initial means. Right? Doing property and being surrendered to the Lord through the agency and the mediatorship of the acharya and Mahalakshmi, that is also a means. But the actual means, the primary means, the ultimate means is the Lord himself. The Lord himself is the ultimate means. He is the ultimate means of liberation, without which all these other means don't mean anything. They don't work. So you can control your mind as much as you like, control your senses as much as you like, approach as many gurus as you want. You can do as many ceremonies as you want, blah, blah, blah. You can do all these other things like that. You will not attain the goal, which is liberation, eternal service to the Lord in Vaikuntha, unless the Lord himself does it. The Lord himself saves you. So he is the means. He's the real means. He's the primary means, like that. Okay, so anyway, so you can just see that Vedanta Deshika has a slightly different idea, right? And he gives these arguments, but these arguments are rejected, right? So let's see what P.B. Nangacharya has to say about these particular points. There are some who draw the wrong conclusion from the point about giving up all dharmas. That is, a dharma is one which states rules on doing things and not doing other things. Since it is said here to give up all dharmas, that would not only include giving up doing these things, but also include giving up not doing other things, the sinful things. That is to start doing things which have been proscribed, right? There's two words in English that says prescribed. If something is prescribed, you have to do it. If something is proscribed, that means you should not do it. It is forbidden. Right. This is not correct. This idea is not correct. Because while it is said that one should give up all dharmas, it is not said that one should do adharmas. Why is that? Giving up adharmas is also a part of dharma. It's an ancillary part. It's a part of dharma. When you say to somebody, be religious, it means don't be irreligious. You can't be both religious and irreligious at the same time. But you don't have to say don't be irreligious, right? You just simply have to say be religious. So it is not possible through its meaning when it is told to give up dharmas, that it could possibly mean giving up not doing our dharmas, right? There's a double negative there. In other words, doing our dharmas, right? Not It's actually a triple negative there if you're saying not doing adharmas. Okay. So not doing adharmas may not be the primary meaning of dharma, right? It's a subsidiary meaning, secondary meaning. But since the word sarva is used here, should it not include the specific, which is giving up, not doing adharmas? That's another question posed by somebody, right? Even if that be the case, that is not what is intended here. Therefore, what is being said is give up the dharmas that ask for specific actions to be performed, right? On what basis is this being decided? The answer is looking at oneself, looking at the Lord, and looking at the goal. Doing the adharmas is rejected. Since doing adharmas does not please the Lord, and the nature of the Chaitanya is that he will not do anything that will not please him, the Lord, looking at oneself, one cannot do the adharmas. Since he does not accept any act on the part of the Chaitanya to save himself other than giving up all such acts, looking at the Supreme Lord, one has to give up. One cannot do the adharmas, one has to give up the adharmas also. So for these two reasons, any act of the Chaitanya is done to please him, the Supreme Lord. Thus, looking at that goal also, one cannot do adharmas. So, how do we give up? How do we know that adharma? Let's summarize that again. How do we know that adharma, giving up adharma, is also included with giving up dharma? Right? Right? Because somebody's posing that. If you give up the dharmas, then the adharmas will come in. Right. So how do we know that part of giving up the dharmas is also giving up the sins? Right? So we look at ourselves, we look at the Lord, and we look at the goal. When we look at ourselves, we realize that we want to please him. It's the nature of us that we want to please him because we're his servants. When we look at him, we realize that that he is saying to us to give up the adharmas. And when we look at the goal, we see that in order to reach the goal, we have to give up the adharmas also. So looking at these three aspects of the situation, we have to also give up the adharmas along with the dharmas. Right? Therefore, even if the word dharma includes not doing adharmas, that meaning is not considered here. Right? So now we're going to go back to the main text. Just continue on. Part of that was part of the main text. Even if it is so, text 209, he reveals, right? So even if, here's the question by Malavala Mamuni, even if the word dharma does not primarily refer to refraining from adharmas, doesn't the fact that it is modified by the word sarva necessarily imply this? To this he reveals, text 209, even if it is so here, it means something other than that. We just covered that with P.V. and Angachari. Even if it can mean that, it does not mean that in this context. Thus, it refers only to the dharmas in the form of the prescribed actions and not to refraining from adharmas, right? And we read that footnote also. On what grounds is this declared? To this he says, Sutra 210, if one looks at oneself, the Lord, and the goal, there is no way for these to enter, right? So we discussed that, P.V. and Angachari's consideration of that. Performance of adharmas is disliked by the Lord, who is the sheshi, or the master. The soul's nature as a shesha, or the servant or slave, is such that it is inappropriate for him to do what the Lord dislikes, but only to do what the Lord likes. Thus, if one looks at oneself, there is no way for these adharmas to enter. Because of his intolerance of connection with other aids, other means, the Lord is the upaya who cannot put up with any other kind of activity on the part of the soul other than the cessation of self-effort, right? Which is not an activity according to Tengalais, but which Vedanta Deshika argues is also an activity, right? So, but in either case, both of the Kalais, we are looking to the cessation of self-effort as being what is the definition of property. Swayatna nivritti, our own self-effort, right? So if one looks at such a Lord, right, who has this intolerance of people taking to other means except for himself, right? There is no way for these adharmas again to enter, right? So those two things. Now, if one looks at the goal of the soul's activity, which is the Lord's pleasure, right? That's what we want. We want to serve the Lord and we want him to be pleased by that service. If one looks at such a goal, right? Moksha is that goal. There is no way for these adharmas to enter. So by these three understandings, by looking at the soul, by looking internally at ourselves, by looking at the nature of God, and by looking at the nature of our service to God, the goal of our activities, by looking at these three things, we realize that adharma cannot enter. Thus, there is no way for these adharmas, which are obstacles or virodhis, to all three, to ourself understanding, to the nature of God, and to the nature of liberation or the service to God, right? The pleasing of him, right? They are obstacles. Adharmas are obstacles to all these three things, and therefore they cannot enter. Therefore, even if the word dharma can mean refraining from adharmas, we have to take it as saying something other than that here. That is the import. After this, he presents the third word, mam. So this was an exposition of the meaning of the word parityaja. We had sarvadharman. Now we've understood the word parityaja. Now he's come to explain the word mam. Sarvadharman parityaja mam is the next word. Mam ekam sharanambaja aham tva sarvapapibhyo mukshishmita masuchaha. So we've come up to mam. So it's a good place to stop. Are there any questions or comments about the word parityaja, about the meaning of tyaj, the meaning of pari, and the meaning of the grammatical form, adding the ya ending, making a gerund or verbal noun out of this verbal root?
No, Swami, I think it's very clear.
Okay, good.
Thank
All
you.
right, so we're gonna leave it here, and we'll pick it up next week with mam. What does mam mean? Yeah, mam means mom. Mom may come. Krishna says me, myself, I. Yeah, me alone. Ekam is going to mean something too. So each one of these words means something, and it'll be very interesting to have the full deep meaning that the acharyas give. But you can see how there's this that today we also got a lot of it had to do with Vedanta Deshika's slight difference on certain aspects like that. But please don't worry too much about that, because it doesn't make that much difference in the practical application of property. It really doesn't. It's really just technical, and it's really, if you want to say to Mayavadis or even to other religionists or even other Vaishnavas, if you want to say to them, if you do karma yoga, do jnana yoga, do your bhakti yoga, if you have faith in that, do that, like that. If you say to people like that, then fine. That's fine if you want to say that to people, because they can understand. The Tengalais have taken it the Tengalai Acharyas have taken it to an extreme here, right? Which cannot be understood by people who don't really understand property, in full. And so Vedanta Deshika was preaching to a lot of people like that. He was preaching to the Advaitins. He was preaching to people who were not necessarily sold on the idea of property as a separate upaya, as a separate means. And so because he was preaching to people like that, he said, oh yeah, okay, Krishna teaches karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. Yeah, if you feel qualified for that, do it. It's a means. It's a means to, like that. The Tengalais are ultra conservative, and they say, no, these are not ways. These are not ways. These are impediments. Thinking that this is a way is an impediment.